It was Valentine's Day, the year 2000. While the world celebrated love, a 9-year-old girl slipped out of her North Carolina home in the dead of night. Hours later, she was seen walking alone on a dark highway in the pouring rain. By morning, she was gone. No body, no answers. Only a backpack buried miles away. For over 2 decades, her family has begged for the truth. What really happened to Asha Degree? It was Valentine's Day, February 14th, 2000. Most families in North Carolina were preparing for a quiet Monday morning. Kids getting ready for school, parents heading to work. But in the Degree household, something unimaginable was about to happen. Asha, a bright, shy 9-year-old girl with pigtails and a love for reading, shared a room with her older brother O'Brien. That night, nothing seemed unusual. The children went to bed after a day of church, family, and playing basketball. But sometime between 2:30 and 3 a.m., Asha quietly climbed out of bed. She put on her backpack, packed with clothes, personal belongings, and even her favorite Tweety Bird purse. Then, she walked out the door. Into the darkness, into the cold rain of Valentine's night. Multiple motorists later reported seeing a small figure, dressed in white, walking along Highway 18. One even tried to stop and ask if she was okay, but the girl bolted into the woods, disappearing into the blackness. That little girl was Asha, and it was the last confirmed time anyone saw her alive. At 6:30 a.m., Asha's mother, Equilla, went to wake the children for school. O'Brien was there. Asha's bed was empty. At first, she thought maybe Asha had overslept or was in the bathroom. But within moments, the awful truth set in. Her 9-year-old daughter was gone. Panic spread through the Degree home. By 6:40, police were called. Asha Degree had vanished, but why? Why would a child, not even a teenager, leave her home in the middle of the night? And who, if anyone, convinced her to walk into the darkness that Valentine's morning? The questions had just begun, and the answers would haunt North Carolina for decades to come. When 9-year-old Asha Degree vanished from her bed on Valentine's Day morning, the Degree family's world was shattered. By sunrise, their quiet neighborhood in Shelby, North Carolina, had transformed into a frantic search zone. At 6:40 a.m., Asha's parents called the police. Officers rushed to the home, questioning the family, neighbors, anyone who might have seen something unusual during the night. But nothing added up. There was no sign of forced entry, no broken windows, no footprints leading into the house. It was as if Asha had simply walked away. Soon, reports began trickling in. Multiple motorists remembered seeing a small figure walking along Highway 18 around 3:30 a.m. She was wearing a long-sleeved white shirt and white pants, carrying a small backpack. One driver pulled over, concerned. But as soon as he tried to approach, the little girl darted into the woods, vanishing into the darkness. That child, investigators confirmed, was Asha. For Asha's parents, Harold and Aquila, the nightmare deepened with every passing hour. Asha was not a runaway. She was only 9 years old, shy, obedient, and deeply attached to her family. She didn't even like walking down the street alone, let alone leaving her house in the dead of night. Why would she leave her warm bed, her safe home, on Valentine's Day morning? Her mother broke down, telling reporters, "I never thought my child would leave our house on her own. Never." Within 24 hours, hundreds of volunteers joined the search. Police, bloodhounds, Helicopters and neighbors combed through miles of woods and back roads for days. They searched in freezing rain and bitter winds. And then they found something. Near a tool shed, about a mile from her home, searchers discovered small candy wrappers, a pencil, and a hair bow. Items that Asha's parents confirmed belonged to her. It meant she had made it that far. But where had she gone next? With every passing day, hope and fear clashed. Some believed Asha was hiding, scared, and might still be found alive. Others feared something far darker, that someone had intercepted her in the night. The community refused to give up. Flyers went up on every corner. Her photo, a smiling little girl with big eyes and pigtails, stared back at people from telephone poles and store windows. But the woods and fields revealed nothing more. As the days turned into weeks, the trail grew colder. And then, nearly a year later, investigators would uncover something that changed everything. Buried in a plastic bag miles away, they would find belongings that proved Asha's disappearance was no accident. But something far more terrifying. For weeks after Asha vanished, hope flickered and faded with every passing day. The Degree family prayed, the community searched. But the woods and highways gave no answers. And then, nearly a year later, something surfaced. Something that made the case darker than anyone could have imagined. It was August 2001, 18 months after Asha disappeared. Construction workers digging along Highway 18 in Burke County, nearly 30 miles from Asha's home, unearthed a strange bundle, a plastic bag. Inside it, another plastic bag. And inside that, belongings that would send chills through investigators. Inside, the bag was Asha's black backpack. It had been carefully wrapped, sealed, and buried underground. Not discarded in haste, not tossed aside. Buried deliberately, as if someone wanted it hidden. Along with the backpack was her Tweety Bird purse, the one her parents said she had packed that night. Forensic testing confirmed they belonged to Asha Degree. The discovery raised terrifying questions. Who buried her belongings 30 miles away? Why would someone carefully preserve them in plastic? And if the backpack was there, where was Asha? Investigators immediately realized this was not a simple runaway case. This was something darker. Someone had taken steps to hide evidence. Inside the backpack, some contents were never made public. The FBI kept certain details secret, hoping only the true perpetrator would know. But what they did reveal was chilling enough. This was no accident. Someone knew what happened to Asha, and someone wanted her to stay hidden. For the Degree family, the discovery was devastating. Hope had kept them going. The belief that maybe Asha was alive, hiding, or had simply lost her way. But now, the buried backpack suggested otherwise. Her mother, Ikwilla, said softly, "I just don't understand. Who would do this to a child?" The buried backpack reignited theories. Had Asha been lured by someone she trusted? Was she picked up that night by a stranger who convinced her to walk into the darkness? Or was this planned long before Valentine's Day? The case shifted from a missing child to a possible abduction and perhaps murder. But if Asha was taken, why had no one ever seen her again? Why was there no ransom, no note, no demands? And, most haunting of all, if her backpack was buried in Burke County, what else might be hidden beneath the soil of North Carolina's woods? The discovery opened more questions than it answered. And investigators knew the mystery was only deepening. When Asha's buried backpack was uncovered in 2001, The case took on a chilling new tone. No longer was it simply about a little girl who left home in the night. Now it was about why she left. And what happened after. Everyone had a theory. And each one was darker than the last. Some investigators wondered, could Asha have run away? She had recently been upset after a basketball game. She was shy, easily embarrassed, and perhaps that night she decided she just couldn't face anyone. Maybe she left in search of freedom. Or maybe she was going to a friend's house, planning to come back. But this theory had holes. Asha was only 9. She had no money, no maps, no experience outside her own neighborhood. And her parents insisted. She adored her family. She was not the kind of child to run away. Others believed something far more sinister. What if Asha had been lured, enticed by someone she trusted, someone who had groomed her quietly without her parents knowing? The idea was horrifying but chillingly possible. Her deliberate packing of a backpack suggested planning. She left in the dead of night as if she had arranged to meet someone, and then vanished. If this was true, it meant someone had manipulated a child into walking straight into danger. Another possibility. She encountered danger on the road. She was last seen on Highway 18, miles from home, walking alone in the cold rain. What if a stranger pulled over, offered her a ride, and took her? If that happened, her chances of survival that night were slim. But then why bury the backpack? Why go through the effort to carefully hide it miles away? This pointed not to a random killer, but to someone who wanted control over the evidence. The most disturbing theory was this, that Asha's disappearance was not an accident or a spontaneous crime. It was planned. Someone convinced her to leave. Someone drove her away. And someone buried her belongings to erase the trail. This theory chilled investigators, because it meant her vanishing was not about a little girl's choice, but about a predator's plan. Through it all, Asha's parents never accepted the runaway theory. Her mother said she was scared of the dark. She never went anywhere alone. She wouldn't just walk out that door. To them, there was no doubt. Someone took their daughter. Someone was still out there, but who? Was it someone from their neighborhood, a family friend, or a stranger who saw Asha on the highway and seized the opportunity? Theories piled up, but hard evidence remained scarce. And then, in the years that followed, new tips would emerge. Mysterious leads that hinted at a terrifying truth hiding in plain sight. By the early 2000s, Asha's case had gone from a local mystery to a national heartbreak. Her smiling school photo stared out from milk cartons, missing person posters, and TV screens. The community prayed for answers. And then, tips began to surface, some hopeful, some horrifying, and some that still chill investigators to this day. One of the earliest tips came from motorists. They swore they saw Asha walking along Highway 18 in the early hours of February 14, 2000. But there was one detail that investigators found especially chilling. One driver said Asha looked frightened, as if she was running from something, or perhaps running to someone. When they tried to stop and ask if she was okay, she bolted into the woods, as if terrified of being caught. Years later, investigators revealed something shocking. Near where her backpack was found, buried in plastic, there were other items discovered. Among them was a children's book about a little girl who ran away, a book checked out from Asha's school library. But her family insisted they had never seen that book at home. So how did it end up buried with her belongings And what did it mean? Another lead came from witnesses who reported seeing a dark green car, possibly a Ford Thunderbird or Lincoln Mark IV. Near the area where Asha was last seen. The car was spotted around the same time Asha disappeared. Some believe she may have willingly gotten inside, thinking she was safe, but no driver was ever identified. Years later, in 2016, an inmate came forward with information. He claimed to know where Asha's body was buried. Investigators searched the location he provided, digging deep into the soil. But nothing was ever found. Was it a cruel hoax? Or a fragment of truth lost to time? Every tip gave hope. Every discovery brought fear. But each one ended the same way, without answers. The FBI called Asha's disappearance one of the most puzzling cases they had ever worked on. The leads were haunting, but they never led to her. For Asha's parents, the endless cycle of tips and dead ends was torture. Her mother said, "Every time the phone rings, I hope it's news about my baby. And every time it's not, my heart breaks all over again." The Degree family lived in a painful limbo, between hope and despair, between faith and fear. The haunting leads proved one thing: someone knew what happened to Asha. Someone had answers that had never been spoken aloud. But who was it? And why, decades later, was the silence still unbroken? The mystery was growing darker, and the next chapter would focus not just on the clues, but on the crushing weight of time. The first days after Asha's disappearance were filled with urgency. Police searches, news broadcasts, volunteers combing the woods. But days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and then into years. And with every sunrise, the weight of time pressed heavier on the Degree family. Asha's parents, Harold and Aquila, refused to give up. They left her room exactly as it was, her favorite stuffed animals on the bed, her school books neatly stacked. Every birthday, every holiday, they lit candles and prayed. Her mother said, "I still set a place for her in my heart every day." But with each passing year, the silence grew louder. Local newspapers ran anniversary stories. Missing girl still not found. Community remembers Asha. Each headline reopened wounds. Each article reminded the world that the little girl in pigtails had never come home. And yet, tips kept coming. From across North Carolina, from across the country. Each one promising answers, but ending in heartbreak. For detectives, the case was like chasing smoke. Every new lead seemed solid at first, but then it dissolved. Theories were debated, suspects questioned, search warrants executed. But without Asha, without her voice, there was always a missing piece. One FBI agent later admitted, "It's the kind of case that keeps you awake at night, because a child doesn't just vanish without someone knowing." For the Degree family, time was cruel. Harold grew quieter, carrying his grief in silence. Aquila turned to faith, telling herself that God knew the truth, even if the world didn't. Her brother O'Brien, who was only 10 when she vanished, grew up in the shadow of her absence, carrying guilt he could never shake. He once said, "I was right there in the room, and she still disappeared." I always ask myself, what if I had woken up? The hardest part for the family was watching the world move forward. Neighbors moved away. Children grew up. New headlines replaced the old. But for them, time stood still, locked forever in February 2000, when Asha walked into the night and never returned. Some days, hope felt possible. They imagined Asha alive somewhere, waiting to be found. Other days, despair was stronger. The backpack, The silence. The years. But through it all, her mother held on to one belief. Until someone proves otherwise, my daughter is alive. 20 years had passed. But the mystery had not aged. Asha Degree was still missing. Her backpack was still buried. And the chilling question still hung in the air. How can a 9-year-old child disappear and remain hidden for decades? The weight of time hadn't buried the truth. It had only made it heavier. By the 2010s, more than a decade had passed since Asha Degree walked into the night and never returned. For many cold cases, time is the enemy. Files gather dust, leads dry up, and names fade into memory. But not Asha's. Her story refused to die. And in 2015, a new spark of hope ignited. The FBI announced a renewed effort into Asha's disappearance. New agents, new technology, and new eyes on old evidence. They released an age progression photo of what Asha might look like as a teenager and later as a young adult. It showed a smiling young woman, the face Asha might have grown into. If she was still alive, for her family, it was bittersweet. A glimpse of the daughter they never got to watch grow up. A reminder that time had passed. But she was still missing. The relaunch of the investigation drew national attention. Television shows, newspaper features, true crime podcasts. Everywhere. Asha's face appeared again, not as a forgotten child, but as a symbol of hope that answers were still possible. The FBI offered a $45,000 reward for information. Tips poured in from across the country. One tip in particular shook investigators. A man claimed he saw someone matching Asha's description getting into a dark green car the morning she disappeared. The car detail matched earlier witness reports from 2000. It wasn't proof, but it was enough to suggest Asha hadn't just wandered away. She had been taken. For the Degree family, the renewed search was a lifeline. Her mother, Iquilla, said, "We're not looking for someone to tell us she's gone. We're looking for someone to help us bring her home." The FBI's involvement gave them strength. For the first time in years, it felt like the truth might finally come out. The public rallied behind the Degree family. Community vigils were held. Posters went up once more. And across America, people who had never heard Asha's story were suddenly captivated, horrified that a 9-year-old could simply vanish, and determined to help. With advances in forensic science, investigators re-examined every piece of evidence: the backpack, the items found in the woods, and the sightings along the highway. But the years had taken their toll. Physical evidence was limited. The answers still lay just out of reach. Renewed hope had lit the path forward. But with every step, investigators hit the same wall. No Asha, no body, no closure. And yet, somewhere out there, someone still knew the truth. The question was, would they ever speak? With the FBI reopening Asha's case, the old theories came alive again. But now with new leads, each theory seemed both more possible and more terrifying. Some still clung to the idea that Asha left on her own. The backpack, the careful packing, the library book about a runaway child. It all seemed to point toward a plan. But how could a 9-year-old survive outside for long? Where would she go? And why would she vanish without a trace if it was her choice? The FBI leaned away from this idea because the buried backpack suggested someone else was involved. Witnesses had reported the dark green car on Highway 18.1, said they saw the child try to avoid headlights. Another swore she darted into the woods when a car slowed. Had Asha been approached by a stranger, someone she feared yet couldn't escape? If so, then the backpack being buried wasn't random. It was methodical. The work of someone trying to erase a trail. This theory grew darker with time. If it was a stranger, they had taken steps to make sure she was never found. But what if it wasn't a stranger at all? What if Asha had been lured by someone she trusted? Someone who promised her safety, or adventure, or even love. Her willingness to leave home at 2:30 in the morning suggested planning. A 9-year-old doesn't do that without guidance. Could she have been tricked into believing she was meeting a friend, or helping someone? If so, then Asha didn't walk into danger blindly. She was led there. Some investigators whispered a darker possibility that whoever took her had studied her, watched her family, planned every detail, the precise burial of her belongings, the timing, the way she vanished without leaving a trace. This wasn't random. It wasn't chaos. It was calculated. For the Degree family, theories didn't matter. All they wanted was the truth. Her mother said, "It doesn't matter how or why. I just need to know where my baby is." But to investigators, revisiting the theories was vital, because somewhere among them lay the answer. And yet, with each theory came the same haunting problem. There was no proof. No body. No confirmed suspect. Only whispers, sightings, and a backpack buried in the ground. Theories could explain the how, but they could never answer the why. And it was the why that made this mystery so chilling. It had been 20 years since Asha Degree vanished. 2 decades of birthdays without her. 2 decades of unanswered prayers. 2 decades of silence. And that silence had become the most terrifying thing of all. Inside the Degree home, Asha's room remained untouched. Her stuffed animal still sat on her bed. Her favorite books still lined the shelf. Her clothes folded neatly, waiting for the child who had never come home. Her mother, Ikwila, once said, "People tell me to move on, but how do you move on when you don't know where your child is?" The silence was not peace. It was torture. Over the years, hundreds of tips poured in. People claimed to have seen her in different states. Others claimed to know what happened. Each tip gave hope, and each dead end destroyed it again. Investigators admitted they were chasing shadows leads that vanished as quickly as they appeared. One haunting image stayed with her parents: the sound of her bedroom door creaking in the night. The empty space where she should have been. Her brother O'Brien, now an adult, still carried the memory. "I was right there. She was in the bed beside me, and then she was gone." That silence haunted him more than words ever could. World around them changed. Children grew up. Technology advanced. New headlines filled the news, but Asha's case never left the Degree family's hearts. They woke every day to the same reality. She was still missing. The silence wasn't just haunting, it was cruel. Experts say there is no grief worse than ambiguous loss, the kind where you don't know if your loved one is alive or dead. For the Degree family, that grief was a daily companion. They could not mourn. They could not celebrate. They could only wait and wait and wait. 20 years later, the silence had become unbearable. But silence doesn't mean absence. Silence doesn't mean the truth isn't out there. Because somewhere, in someone's memory, in someone's conscience, the truth about Asha Degree was still alive. The only question was, would the silence ever be broken? On Valentine's Day of the year 2000, 9-year-old Asha Degree stepped into the darkness, and the world never saw her again. 2 decades have passed, but the mystery of what happened to her still lingers, as sharp, as haunting, and as painful as the first night. For investigators, Asha's disappearance is one of the most baffling mysteries in modern American history. No ransom note, no body, no suspect ever charged, just a trail of fragments, a backpack buried in the soil, motorists who saw her walking in the rain, and a family that never stopped searching. Even the FBI admitted, this is one of those cases that stays with you, because she deserves to be found. For the Degree family, the pain never eased. Her father, Harold, often said he couldn't sleep without imagining where his daughter might be. Her mother, Equila, clung to faith, telling herself, God knows where my child is, and one day will know too. Every February 14th, they hold a memorial walk in her honor. Neighbors, friends, and strangers gather, walking the same stretch of Highway 18 where Asha was last seen. They walk not just for her, they walk for justice. They walk for answers. Asha's story is no longer just a local tragedy. It is a national mystery. Her face, frozen in time at 9 years old, represents every missing child whose voice was silenced too soon. Her case has been featured on television shows, in documentaries, and in countless articles. And yet, despite all the attention, the truth has remained elusive and still. Hope endures. Hope that somewhere, someone remembers a detail. Hope that guilt might finally force a confession. Hope that new technology could uncover what decades of searching could not. Because as long as there is no proof otherwise, her family insists, Asha is alive. But here lies the haunting truth. If Asha was taken, the person responsible has lived free for more than 20 years. If she is gone, her family has never had the chance to say goodbye. And if she is alive, she has spent decades hidden in silence. The unending mystery of Asha Degree is not just about what happened that night. It's about what America still doesn't know. On that cold Valentine's morning, a little girl walked out of her home carrying only a backpack and her innocence. What happened next remains one of the most heartbreaking questions in American history. And until the day the silence breaks, the story of Asha Degree will remain exactly what it has always been, a mystery without an ending.